Norway Chess has begun. We've got some big players in this tournament. We've got Magnus. We've got Liren. They're playing against each other in this first round, which is what we're going to take a look at today. A world champion head-to-head, if you will. We've got Hikaru, Fabiana. We've got some big players here. But today, we're going to be looking at the GOAT versus the current world champion, Liren. The first game here, I'm just going to speed through, and that's the game. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time. No, this was just the classical portion. They drew after 14 moves with threefold repetition. Not much to look at here. I mean, this is all theory, a closed Catalan, where the players just repeated moves. I mean, this position has been reached hundreds of times. And yeah, that was it. So let's go to the Armageddon, shall we? This is where the actual chess happens. The Armageddon is a time format where white has 10 minutes, Liren, and black, Magnus Carlsen, has 7 minutes. Now the thing is, black starts with less time, but if the game is drawn, black wins. So white has more time, but has to actually win the game to not lose. It's very interesting. And the players get no bonus time until after move 40, in which case they get 1 second bonus time every move. And let's take a look at the game. So we have an English opening here. This is like the reverse Sicilian. You can imagine like, you know, e4, c5 is a Sicilian defense. And we kind of have the reverse of that going on here. So it's like white is playing a Sicilian, but with the first move. And we'll take a look at the opening. We have g3, very similar to the last game where Ding decided to play the Catalan. And we have h6. Now, if you know Magnus, you know he's going to take you out of theoretical waters pretty early, right? He's going to want to spice up the game, make you a little bit uncomfortable. So instead of playing one of the main moves like, oh, I don't know, d5, c6, knight c6, bishop c5, or that's f5. Sorry, you can't play this move until the pawn moves, bishop c5. Instead of playing one of those, he's like, you know what? I just need to draw. So I'm going to play h6. Just kind of hang back and see what Ding wants to do. And yeah, so we have knight c6 developing a piece. Magnus develops as well, e4, and d6, taking us pretty much out of all known theory here, all played games. Now, the main moves here are like taking on c3, because why else did you move your bishop to b4? So, you know, you double the structure in one way or another, or you develop your knight or something like that. But instead, d6. And there's only been 5 games in the database that I have available to me. Played in this position. We have the knight developing, and here we're out of theory. Magnus moves this bishop to b4 and then said, you know what? I don't want it on b4. I want it on c5. Because why not? Now, Ding here is a little bit, you know, unsure of what to do, so plays a kind of waiting move, h3, to see what Magnus wants to do. And the computer threw out this line with d4, striking in the center immediately, kind of saying to black, like, hey, you're wasting a lot of time here with these slow moves, h6, bishop b4 to c5, right? Try and strike in the center, open it up, and try to go for something like this, where you get your knight very active here on f5, and, you know, you're going to play like king h1 to get out of the pin, throw your pawns forward, and try and, you know, take advantage of your bishops and make something happen. Instead, Ding plays a bit passively, plays this h3, and Magnus just says, okay, I'll take some space over here on the queen side, and we have castles. Knight develops, and here, ladies and gentlemen, any normal person, right? Any normal person, including the engine, just castles here. You just castle, right? Because what else are you going to do? You castle, or you develop a piece, right? You do one of those things, you develop a piece or you castle, right? But Magnus is not a normal person. He's Magnus, who only needs a draw in this game. And he's also just a very silly person. So instead of being a normal chess player, you know what he does? He takes a look at this position and says, that d4 square looks pretty tasty. Pretty tasty. You know what does well on a square like that, where there's no pawns that can kick it away? A knight. A knight loves that kind of square. So should you jump your knight in now? Well, no, because then you have to trade it, and the bishop is still good here, but it's not as good as, say, a knight. So what he does is he says, how do I get this knight to that square? And if you ask yourself that question, there's only a certain number of ways you can do that. And so Magnus plays knight h7, knight f8, knight e6, and knight d4. My man plays 1, 2, 3, 4 knight moves in a row without developing any other pieces or castling his king, and just lets Ding move his king out of the way, push the f-pawn, and take all this space on the king side, where, but now Magnus has a monster knight on d4, and the position is balanced. Like, this is what Magnus does to people. He just says, oh, that's a nice square. Yeah, we're going to plop our knight there. It's like over the board. You could just take the knight, plop it there. That's basically what he did. Nothing else in Magnus's position changed in the past few moves. Literally nothing else. He just moved the knight to d4, while Ding just improved his position, moving the king out of the pin, pushing his f-pawn a few squares forward. Like, this is ridiculous. And the knight gets traded off right away, but he just replaces it with the c6 knight, right? Like, that was his whole point. He was like, I want my f knight there so that when he takes, I can replace it with a different knight. This is ridiculous. This is insane. And now look at this weak d3 pawn. This light squared bishop kind of sucks. Magnus has a beautiful knight here. And yeah, I can't believe this, man. So Magnus finally develops his bishop. Still not castling because the position is quite closed. There's not very many pawn breaks in this position here. So he develops and pushes b5. Now Magnus only needs a draw, but instead he's like, nah, draw is boring. I got a good knight. Let's throw our pawns forward. So Ding decides to go ahead with this queen g4 and try to start some kind of attack and say, Magnus, you're stupid. Why didn't you castle your king? And also, he's got all this space over here. It only makes sense, right? Now here, Ding could have gone for something like f6 right away. Try and blow this open, right? The rook is here, so you want to try and open it up. Magnus could say keep it closed, and you could, trade off here to open up the position a little bit and start, trying to create some light squared weaknesses, perhaps, like the diagonal here. The bishop can try and stare down, and go for something like this, where maybe like c6, say, and you get like bishop c1, maybe wrap it around this way, or bishop c3 immediately, or even just g4. Try and blow up the king side, right? Now, none of that happens. Instead, we have the queen going to g4, and Magnus just says, okay, king f8. What? My man just playing king f8, and the queen's like, okay, now let's try and get something going over here. Maybe some bishop nonsense, or, pushing this pawn forward. Magnus says, no. Shut it all down. Again, he just needs a draw. He's got a beautiful knight, again on d4. This bishop sucks, as I've said. The light squared bishop's trying to break out. The dark squared bishop does a pretty good job over here. And yeah, I really like black's position here. I mean, just locking it all up. There's no attack on the king. The king is completely safe. And the queen just goes back. Because what else are you going to do? Ding realizes, okay, we're going to play a very slow maneuvering locked game here, so let's bring our queen back. The queen is better on d1 than it was on h5. I mean, it's more flexible, right? You've got options. You defend these squares from the knight ever jumping in, and you just kind of hold your position together. The queen here wasn't really threatening anything. And Magnus decides not to open it up. He keeps it locked, takes a bunch of space over here on the queen side. So now Magnus has all this space over here. Sure, Ding has this, but I mean, teamed with the knight, this is crazy. And also the knight here, you're kind of asking for this doubling of your pawns, which we'll see a bit later. The bishop drops back to trade a couple of pieces here, and Magnus just does what he does. He goes into an endgame. He goes into an endgame where he's got a very solid locked position and a couple of weaknesses. And that's all he needs. That's all he needs, is just a little bit of a weakness in the opposing side's structure. And he locks it all up and he says, all right, it's go time. And by it's go time, I mean, we still have another 40 moves in this game of maneuvering. I'm going to go pretty quick through it. Look at this king walk. So earlier in the game, right, Magnus said, you know what, let's play knight h7 to f8 to e6 to d4 and have a great position. Now he says, okay, so Ding is trying to attack me over here, maybe get the rooks, the queen, move the king out of the way, bring the other rook, something like that, and he's trying to blow open the king side. So Magnus says, okay, My king is going to be better on b6. So let's walk our king to b6. Because what else is white going to do? The position's completely locked, and it's going to take forever to prepare a pawn break like this. So both sides just kind of maneuver their pieces, right? We have a lot of maneuvering. Both sides just walk their king all the way over here to the queen side, right? Like all like, it's ridiculous. They're like, let's get our kings to safety in their little bunkers over here, and we're going to blow open the king side. So we eventually, and keep in mind, Magnus only needs a draw to win. Ding has to be the one to create something. He has to create something out of nothing. This is a very balanced position, but white has to take a chance to try and win. Otherwise, I mean, you're going to lose anyway, right, if you draw. So we have a lot of maneuvering, and eventually g5, opening up the position, and now it's going to be a question of, can you win this queen endgame? The answer is no. In fact, white has to be the one to be careful, because after this king move, remember when I said these weaknesses over here, right? Yeah, we're going to pick up a couple of pawns, and sure, these didn't fall, but they suck anyway, and he was threatening them earlier. So the king had to defend the pawns, and Magnus now has a passed pawn, and you don't want to go for this, because then it's, you know, just going to be a draw anyway. Even though, you know, you have these pawns going, it's still, well, you don't want to do that, because then you trade into a losing king and pawn endgame. But anyway, the point is Magnus just needs a draw. So he just holds the position and just starts giving perpetual checks. And yeah, that's the game. You, again, don't want to push your pawn, because, you know, it's still going to be a draw anyway. You're not going to win. And white's going to have to give perpetual check because this pawn is making it through. Yeah, so Magnus forces the draw here with perpetual check, and he wins the Armageddon. Magnus has 1.5 points now, leading the tournament. Now, the rest of the games are still going on at the time of this recording, but Magnus and Ding, they end the round. They are the first round to end here. That first game ended in like 14 moves with threefold repetition, which was kind of crazy, and they just went straight for Armageddon. And yeah, Magnus, even though he's not the current world champion, still shows that he is the GOAT, even though they ended in a draw. But hey, it's the time format, or the game format, whatever. Well, I'm excited to see how the rest of this tournament unfolds. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, who you think is going to win this tournament, whether it's going to be Magnus, Ding, Hikaru, Fabi, and, you know, we'll just see what happens. I got a lot of energy. I had a cold brew earlier. All right. I'll see you guys later.